It is time for the hot topic of the hour right now. The House Oversight Committee doing some recess work by interviewing former Biden White House spokesman Ian Sams. This is the latest testimony in the Biden Autopen investigation. Oversight Chair James Comer giving insight into the interview and just how close Sams actually was to the 46th president.
He saw Joe Biden, talked to Joe Biden 2 times, the entire stint as White House spokesperson. But yet he would every day tweet and issue statements from the podium of the White House, you know, combating everything that we were doing. In fact, Robert Hur spent more time with Joe Biden than Ian Sams. And I think it contradicts everything that the former Biden people are saying with respect to the president's mental fitness. There were very few people that were around Joe Biden, especially at the end. And that's when the majority of the pardons and executive orders were signed.
Comer giving Sams credit for being forthright, but still has concerns over who was giving out talking points in the Biden White House. Sams portrayed himself in the media as a staunch defender of Biden, especially when questions began mounting about his mental fitness. Here he is just last year.
When I deal with him, he's sharp, he's asking tough questions, and he's speaking, I think maybe most importantly, speaking passionately about what matters to him. That's the President Biden that so many of us experience every single day. Someone who's asking the tough questions so that we as staff can be sharp to do our job best for the American people.
Well, meanwhile, the Oversight Project obtaining documents from the DOJ showing that former Assistant Deputy Attorney General Bradley Weinsheimer raised concerns about Biden's slew of term end pardons for federal convicts. He sent an email to the Biden staffers on January 18th this year. Here's in part what he wrote. The White House has described those who receive commutations as people convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. I think you should stop saying that because it is untrue or at least misleading. He also wrote, even with the exceedingly limited review we were permitted to do of the individuals we believed you might be considering for commutation, we initially identified 19 that were highly problematic, yet those pardons went through anyway. Elizabeth, just to put a finer point on this, and we've talked about it on this program repeatedly, these are people that were people convicted of drug trafficking offenses. One police officer was killed. The victims' families, Jonathan Fahey representing one of those victims' families, went to the Biden White House. They went to the DOJ and said, you cannot let these violent criminals out. Who was in charge?
That's been all of our questions, right? Who is in charge of this White House? Who is the one who is apparently telling people to go out and claim that Joe Biden is at his sharpest and best when no one had seen him in apparently, a year? Who is telling people to go out and make these pardons when their own internal research is saying this is a bad idea? And all I keep thinking about, Cheryl, I'm looking back and I'm thinking, what if this was Donald Trump, right? How would this be reported on? And the fact is, Joe Biden's out of office, of course. There's an investigation, and people in the media are telling us, why are we talking about this?
Well, yeah. And, there's another piece of these emails that he had sent, and this got me. He says later in the email, he writes this: look, I read the statement you put out in the president's name. Ding, saying you've released a bunch of nonviolent drug offenders. You've got murderers on your list today. So this official was throwing the red flag out, saying you can't let these people out of prison. Did it anyway.
Well, this impresses me as being a very politically stupid thing to do once the word gets out that you were allowing violent criminals to get out of prison. How does this help the Democratic Party in any way? And we have to keep coming back to this theme where the Democratic Party is just too soft on crime. And in this case, they're practically condoning criminal behavior. I mean, this has got to stop, and they have got to change their tune as far as their toleration of crime goes.
Well, and, Elizabeth, we had Congressman Brandon Gill on in the last hour, and I asked him at the end, because he's on House Oversight. This is the committee, James Comer's committee, that's connecting this investigation during recess. And I asked him, do you want to see Kamala Harris subpoenaed? And he said yes.
Well, I mean, who doesn't, right? Because it seems no one was next to Joe Biden. We can't get any answers. So hopefully, if it's Jill Biden, if it's Kamala, maybe it's Karine Jean-Pierre, it's going to be someone at the very top, someone who at least saw this man every single day, who can give the American people the answers they deserve. You keep bringing up very correctly, the Democrats are soft on crime. But who in the Democrats, right? Who was actually running that White House and making these decisions?
And John, real quick, got about 30 seconds here, but this wasn't just about these pardons. There's all these different executive orders that were signed with the Autopen. In particular, these are things that directed energy policy in the United States. This is an executive order that we find out later from Speaker Mike Johnson. He asked Biden, why did you stop exports of LNG to Western Europe? And Biden said, no, I didn't do that. And Speaker Mike Johnson's like, yes, you did. We stopped giving our allies nat gas. And guess who they had to go to for energy? Vladimir Putin. That was Biden.
Yeah,
that
who's in charge? That's an important question that needs to be answered. And people, I think, realize more and more that green energy is responsible for the headaches a number of middle-class Americans have today with ever-rising utility bills. That's ridiculous. You know, you talk about the impact of tariffs on inflation, but we still have green energy policies providing a very painful lift to prices that are paid by everyday Americans.
Everybody, after the show this morning, go look at your electricity bill and then email us.